February 1st, 1959. Northern Ural Mountains, Soviet Union. The wind that night did not howl. It pressed, steady, relentless, against the canvas of a small expedition tent pitched high on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. The name came from the local Mansi language, Mountain of the Dead. Inside the tent, 23-year-old Yuri Yudin sat cross-legged, rubbing his hands together, trying to coax warmth back into his fingers. His joints ached in a way he had learned to ignore. Rheumatism had been his quiet companion since childhood, and on this expedition, a grueling Category 3 winter hike, the most difficult rating the Soviet Union allowed, it had already cost him sleep. Across from him, Igor Dyatlov adjusted a portable radio, his breath fogging the air. Dyatlov was 23 as well, calm, methodical, the kind of man others trusted, without quite knowing why. He was the leader of this group, 9 young hikers, students, and recent graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, engineers, physicists, radio technicians, people trained to solve problems, not panic. Someone left. Someone else scribbled in a diary. No one sensed that this would be the last normal moment any of them would ever experience. 2 days earlier, on January 28th, Yudin had made the decision that would save his life. His pain had become unbearable, and as the group passed through the final Mansi settlement, 2nd Northern, he turned back. The others hugged him, teased him, promised to bring back stories. They left without knowing that Yudin would become the only living witness to who they were before the mountain changed them. The remaining 9 continued north, pulling sleds through knee-deep snow, climbing into a landscape that erased sound and scale. Their goal was Mount Oterton, roughly 10 kilometers beyond Kholat Syakhl. Weather reports from nearby stations would later describe worsening conditions, winds exceeding 60 kilometers per hour, temperatures plunging below -30 Celsius. But whatever the reason, by nightfall, the tent was anchored to the frozen slope, angled against the wind. Inside, they ate, wrote, took photographs, and then something happened. We don't know what time it was. Watches stopped at different moments. Cameras captured nothing after dusk, but at some point in the night, the tent was cut open from the inside, not unzipped. Slashed, the fabric bore long, desperate tears, as if hands shaking with urgency had carved escape routes rather than fumbled for the exit. One by one, the hikers fled into the darkness, barefoot, in socks, in underwear. They left behind boots, coats, food, money, documents, items no rational person abandons in a blizzard unless the alternative feels worse than death. Down the slope, their footprints, later documented by investigators, moved in an uneven line toward the forest, nearly a mile away. Not running, not chaotic, just leaving. At the edge of the trees, beneath a large cedar, 2 bodies would eventually be found. Yuri Krivonishenko and Georgy Doroshenko, both barefoot, both wearing only underwear. Their hands were burned and raw, fingers stripped of skin as if they had clawed at branches or firewood with animal desperation. A small fire had been lit beneath the tree. Weak, inadequate. Above them, broken branches suggested someone had climbed, perhaps to look back toward the tent, perhaps to watch whatever had driven them out. 3 more bodies would later be discovered between the cedar and the tent, Igor Dyatlov among them, frozen in positions that suggested they were trying to return. The remaining 4 would not be found until May, buried deep in a ravine under meters of snow. Their injuries would defy explanation. On February 1st, none of that had happened yet. On February 12th, the group was supposed to send a telegram confirming their return. When no message arrived, families grew anxious, but not alarmed. Delays were common. By February 20th, search parties were dispatched. What day? February 26th, 1959. Eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. The first thing the searchers noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no wind strong enough to justify the unease settling in their chests, just a white, endless slope rising into fog, and a single dark shape ahead, unnatural against the snow. The tent. It was still standing. That detail would haunt everyone who saw it. Avalanches don't leave tents upright. Storms don't carefully spare poles and guy lines. The tent leaned slightly, half buried in drifted snow, but intact enough that the scene felt paused, as if time had stopped mid-breath. When the search team reached it, they didn't rush inside. They circled first, and that's when they saw the slashes. Long, jagged cuts torn through the side facing downhill, fabric stiff with ice, edges frayed outward. Inside, nothing made sense. Boots lying neatly along the wall. Heavy coats folded, food prepared but uneaten. Cameras resting where hands had last placed them. A map pinned to the tent wall. There were no signs of struggle inside. No blood, no indication of a fight. Just absence. Then someone noticed the footprints leading away from the tent, down the slope, toward the forest. The men followed them in silence. The prints were shallow, softened by wind and time, but unmistakable. Some were socked feet, some bare. None wore boots. The spacing suggested walking, not sprinting, not fleeing, choosing. After nearly a kilometer, the forest swallowed the trail. At the base of a massive cedar tree, the first bodies lay waiting. Yuri Krivonishenko was closest to the fire pit. His skin was gray-blue, his face frozen in a grimace that investigators would later struggle to interpret. Beside him, Georgy Doroshenko. Both young men had burns on their hands and legs. Not fatal burns, but desperate ones. The kind caused by gripping embers too long, by refusing to let go of heat even as flesh gives way. Their hands were shredded, skin missing, fingernails torn back. Autopsies would later suggest something unsettling. They had been alive while injuring themselves, conscious, fighting cold with instinct, not logic. Above them, high in the cedar, broken branches stretched 5 meters up. Someone had climbed. Someone had needed to see. The searchers stood there, staring back toward the slope where the tent still waited, barely visible through trees and fog. Then they found Igor Dyatlov. He lay face down between the cedar and the tent, as if frozen mid-crawl. One hand clenched a branch, his body angled uphill. He wasn't dressed for survival. A sweater, thin pants, one sock. His expression was calm, almost resigned. Nearby lay Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22 years old. Her body bore bruises and abrasions, but no fatal wounds. She, too, faced the tent. She, too, seemed to be trying to go back. The fifth body, Rustem Slobodin, was found days later. He had a fracture in his skull. Not severe enough to kill him, according to official reports, but his death was still ruled hypothermia. 5 hikers accounted for, 4 still missing. As days turned into weeks, The search expanded. Snowstorms erased tracks. Spring began its slow approach, threatening to melt secrets locked beneath ice. The Soviet authorities took control of the investigation quickly. Too quickly, some would later argue. Files were classified, witness statements trimmed, conclusions drafted before all bodies were recovered. But even within those constraints, the facts refused to align. Why abandon the tent? Why leave without boots? Why cut their only shelter open instead of using the exit? Then May arrived, and with it, the thaw. On May 4th, nearly 3 months after the incident, searchers probing a ravine beneath several meters of snow discovered what the mountain had hidden. Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. They lay together as if the ravine had gathered them deliberately. What the investigators found next would fracture any remaining faith in simple explanations. Dubina was missing her tongue and her eyes. Zolotaryov's chest was crushed inward, ribs shattered. Thibault-Brignol had catastrophic skull trauma. Kolevatov showed signs of neck injury. These were not injuries caused by falling gently into snow. The force required was enormous, comparable, one pathologist would later say, to a car crash. And yet, there were no external wounds, no broken skin consistent with blows, no signs of a fight, no footprints leading to the ravine, no evidence of another group, no explanation. Even more disturbing, some of their clothing tested positive for radiation, not enough to be immediately lethal, but enough to raise eyebrows, even in a country that tested weapons and guarded secrets with ruthless discipline. Semyon Zolotaryov, unlike the others, was a decorated World War II veteran, older, experienced. His camera was found with undeveloped film still inside. The last photograph would show nothing but blurred light and darkness. When the case was officially closed in May 1959, the conclusion was as vague as it was chilling. The hikers died as a result of a compelling natural force which they were unable to overcome. No force named, no mechanism explained. Families were told not to ask questions. Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor, attended 5 funerals in Sverdlovsk. He would later say that something in his friends' faces looked wrong. Not fear, not pain, but confusion, as if they had seen something they couldn't understand. And on Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead, the wind continued to press, steady and relentless, against the snow. Sverdlovsk, Soviet Union, summer 1950. The funerals were closed casket. That alone told the families everything the authorities refused to say out loud. Parents were allowed brief viewings, just long enough to identify clothing or a face altered by frost and time. Many would later claim that what they saw did not resemble deaths from simple exposure. Skin carried an unnatural hue, dark orange, almost bronze. Hair appeared lighter, strangely bleached. Some faces looked swollen, distorted, as if pressure had been applied from within. Yuri Yudin stood apart from the crowds, leaning on a cane. He watched mothers collapse into grief, fathers clench their jaws in silence. He knew every one of those faces. He had shared meals with them, jokes, plans for the future. And he could not escape a single thought. That should have been me. The official investigation moved quickly to closure. Files were stamped secretna, classified, access restricted, photographs sealed, witnesses warned against speculation. But rumors, like cold air, find their way through cracks. locals from the Mansi villages spoke quietly of something in the mountains. They had avoided Kholat Syakhl for generations, not out of superstition, but experience. Hunters reported strange lights in the sky that winter, bright orbs moving silently over the northern ridges. Some searchers admitted seeing them too, drifting above the tree line like slow-burning stars. One patrol log, later declassified, would note spherical objects observed the night before the bodies were discovered. The military denied everything. Then there was the radiation. Ludmila Dubinina's clothing, particularly a sweater she wore, showed elevated levels of beta radiation, not lethal, but abnormal. When asked, officials suggested contamination from a previous workplace, but the explanation faltered. The level was inconsistent across items, and no clear source was ever documented. More unsettling were the injuries. Forensic expert Boris Vozrozdeny, assigned to the autopsies, noted that the chest trauma suffered by Dubinina and Zolotayov required a very strong force, yet lacked the tissue damage normally seen in blunt force attacks. No bruising, no broken skin, no defensive wounds. It was as if something had crushed them without touching them. The tongue. Dubina's missing tongue became the most sensational detail and the most misunderstood. Officially, it was attributed to post-mortem scavenging, but there were no bite marks, no evidence of animal feeding on surrounding tissue. Her mouth was open, her eyes missing as well. Some details were quietly omitted from reports. The position of the bodies suggested organization. Clothing from the dead had been redistributed among the living, implying conscious decision-making. Survival strategy. Rational thought, at least at first, which raised a terrifying possibility. Whatever drove them from the tent did not render them immediately insane. They were thinking. They were adapting. And yet, they still died. Decades later, when investigative files were partially released, independent researchers began reconstructing the final hours. Timelines were drawn, temperatures plotted, wind patterns analyzed. One theory gained traction: a katabatic wind, a sudden violent downslope wind capable of producing deafening noise, pressure changes, and disorientation, enough to make a tent feel unsafe. Enough to trigger panic, but it failed to explain the injuries. Another theory proposed a slab avalanche, one that struck without fully burying the tent, forcing escape. But again, no avalanche debris, no terrain markers, no matching trauma patterns for all victims. Then there were darker ideas. Secret weapons tests, parachute mines, infrasound experiments, military patrols mistaking hikers for intruders. Every theory collided with the same problem: lack of evidence and too much silence. Yuri Yudin spent the rest of his life searching for answers. He spoke with investigators, scientists, journalists. He returned to the pass years later, standing where the tent once stood. In interviews, he remained calm, measured, but once, near the end of his life, he admitted something he rarely said aloud. He believed his friend saw something, not an avalanche, not the weather, something that made trained, rational adults flee barefoot into a frozen night without hesitation, something that made the mountain feel less deadly than what was inside the tent. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case. 60 years too late. Their conclusion would once again point to natural causes. But even now, standing on that slope, with the wind pressing steadily against your body, one question refuses to freeze. What could be so terrifying that death by exposure felt like the safer option? And why did the mountain keep its answer? Northern Urals, winter, after midnight. To understand what may have happened on Kholat Syakhl, you have to return to the night itself, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a lived experience. Imagine the sound first. Not a roar, not a crash. A low, sustained pressure wind accelerating down the slope, compressing the air around the tent. A vibration you feel in your chest before you hear it. The kind of noise that makes rational thoughts slippery, that triggers panic without explanation. This is where investigators would later place the idea of infrasound. In 1968, French scientist Vladimir Gavreau discovered that wind passing over certain shapes, mountains, ridges, can generate low-frequency sound waves below the threshold of human hearing. Infrasound doesn't register as noise, it registers as dread, anxiety, nausea, disorientation, a powerful urge to escape. Kholat Syakhl's topography fits the profile. A long, rounded ridge, a steep drop, strong katabatic winds common in winter. All the ingredients for a natural generator of psychological terror. If the hikers experienced this, it could explain the unthinkable decision to abandon the tent, not logically, instinctively, cutting their way out because fine motor skills were gone, because the idea of staying felt immediately fatal. But even this theory fractures when confronted with what happened next. Infrasound does not break ribs. It does not crush skulls. It does not remove tongues. The ravine victims remain the central wound in every explanation. When the four were discovered, they were not scattered. They were arranged by terrain and gravity, yes, but also by intent. Clothing had been layered, hats pulled down, feet wrapped in fabric. Someone had tried to survive. The ravine itself was steep, nearly 4 meters deep, and lined with rock and ice. A fall could cause injury, but not injuries of that magnitude without external trauma. Not symmetrical rib fractures, not the kind of internal damage that suggests compression, not impact. One pathologist would later describe it this way: comparable to the force of a car crash, yet without the car. Then there were the lights. Multiple witnesses across the northern Urals reported glowing spheres in the sky during late January and early February of 1959. Yellow, orange, moving silently, changing direction. These accounts were documented, filed, ignored. The Soviet military conducted weapons testing in remote regions, often without warning. Parachute mines, designed to detonate in mid-air, were known to produce intense shockwaves without leaving classic blast damage. Enough force to cause internal injuries. Enough noise and light to trigger panic. Enough secrecy to bury the truth. But again, evidence falters. No blast marks, no shrapnel, no confirmed test schedules released, only silence. And silence in the Soviet Union was often intentional. Spring 1960. Moscow. A year after the incident, the Dyatlov Pass case should have been dead. Officially, it was. But in offices far from the Urals, behind heavy doors and thicker silence, the files did not disappear. They were reorganized, relabeled, stripped of conclusions and reduced to fragments. Not to solve the mystery, but to control it. Because the unanswered questions had begun to spread. Students at Ural Polytechnic whispered theories in dorm rooms. Climbers compared notes in mountain clubs. Engineers questioned physics. Doctors questioned autopsy language that felt deliberately vague. the phrase compelling natural force became a quiet joke and a quiet warning. You didn't press for details. One man did. His name was Boris Sluptsov, one of the original search party members. He had stood at the tent, followed the footprints, seen the bodies beneath the cedar, and what stayed with him wasn't fear. It was the precision of the scene. Sluptsov would later recall that the footprints showed discipline, a line, order, no signs of chaos until the forest. Whatever happened, it unfolded in stages. Stage 1, escape the tent. Stage 2, regroup in the trees. Stage 3, attempt survival. Stage 4, something goes catastrophically wrong. This sequence haunted him. If panic alone drove them out, why didn't it continue? Why did it shift into strategy? That question led researchers back to the tent itself. Re-examinations of photographs revealed something overlooked for decades. The tent was partially collapsed, yes, but not destroyed. Snow had drifted against one side, enough to deform the fabric, enough to apply pressure, enough to convince someone inside that structural failure or suffocation was imminent. A slab avalanche. Not the roaring wall people imagine, but a dense, heavy sheet of compacted snow, sliding just meters, striking silently but forcefully. Recent computer simulations would later show this was possible, but again, the injuries didn't match. Only some hikers showed trauma. Others died untouched, which implies separation. The group did not die together. They fractured. At some point after reaching the forest, the 9 became smaller groups, 2 by the fire, 3 attempting to return to the tent, 4 moving deeper, down into the ravine. Why go down? The ravine offered shelter from wind, snow cover, a place to dig, to build a den, to survive the night. But it also offered something else, darkness. If something had followed them, or if something was still happening above, they may have believed lower ground was safer. That decision sealed their fate. Snow accumulating over the ravine created a false floor. Beneath it, empty space, ice-covered rocks. A collapse from above could deliver immense force without external injury. A human body dropped from height onto unyielding rock, then buried, would show exactly what the autopsies described. Internal damage. Minimal surface trauma. Suddenly, the ravine makes sense. The tongue, too, begins to lose its supernatural edge. Soft tissue exposed to flowing water, bacteria, and time. Eyes, lips, tongue. These go first. The mountain doesn't need monsters. It has physics. And yet, not everything resolves. Why the radiation? Why the lights? Why the secrecy? Why did authorities restrict access instead of clarifying? Some argue coincidence. Others, embarrassment. A tragedy born of miscalculation by elite students was easier to bury than explain. But there is another interpretation, quieter, more unsettling. That the truth was ordinary, but its implications were not. That 9 competent people made a single, catastrophic decision under pressure, and that decision revealed how thin the line is between control and chaos. Yuri Yudin never fully accepted this. In his final interviews, he acknowledged natural explanations, but with reluctance. He had known these people too well. He trusted their judgment too much. They wouldn't all panic. He said once, "Not like that. Not together." In the end, perhaps the most disturbing element of the Dyatlov Pass is not what killed them. It's how easily it could happen again. A bad decision, a misunderstanding of nature, a moment where survival instincts override reason. On a slope called the Mountain of the Dead. Late 1980s, Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. The Soviet Union was unraveling. As archives cracked open and old certainties collapsed, the Dyatlov Pass case resurfaced, not as rumor, but as a question long denied oxygen. Journalists filed requests. Historians revisited sealed boxes. Climbers demanded clarity. What emerged wasn't a revelation. It was a pattern. Documents were missing, pages removed, photographs referenced but absent, testimony summarized rather than quoted. The case file read like a story told by someone careful not to say too much. One omission stood out immediately. The timeline. Official reports never fixed the precise moment the hikers left the tent. Estimates ranged wildly. Midnight, early morning, sometime before dawn. This vagueness wasn't due to lack of data. It was due to avoidance, because locking in the time would require explaining why. Then came the photographs. Recovered cameras had captured the final days of the expedition. Smiling faces, camp chores, snow-blown ridges. But the last roll of film, taken the night of February 1st, contained images that unsettled even hardened investigators. Blurry streaks of light, dark frames pierced by glowing shapes. Some dismissed them as overexposed stars, camera shake, or accidental exposures during movement. Others saw something else. Objects in motion, luminous, directional, not proof, but not nothing. Yet the northern Urals were no stranger to secrecy. Closed cities, restricted airspace, unmarked facilities hidden in forest and rock. And February 1959 was not a quiet month. That winter, the Soviet military conducted multiple classified tests across remote regions. Records remain incomplete. Some remain sealed. Correlation is not causation, but it breeds doubt. Then there were the searchers themselves. Several reported symptoms after exposure to the site: headaches, metallic tastes, sudden nausea. One claimed his hair began to fall out weeks later. None of this was documented officially. All of it was dismissed as stress. Still, it lingered. In 1997, journalist Yuri Kuntsevich, who would later found the Dyatlov Group Foundation, began collecting testimonies. Not theories, memories. The consistency was troubling. Everyone remembered confusion, contradictions, being told to stop asking questions, and one recurring detail, the feeling that the mountain was being watched, not by something alive, by something institutional. In 2013, when Yuri Yudin died, his final statements were revisited. He no longer argued for a single explanation. Instead, he framed the tragedy as layered. There was nature, he said, and then there was something else on top of it. He never named it. In 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the case publicly. The conclusion, released in 2020, pointed definitively to a slab avalanche, modern modeling, clean math, a tidy ending.